Here's Navarro on the run. Navarro's going to keep it. Navarro for 6. Touchdown, Bobcat.
I feel I had a hard time staying in my own lane.
Oh my goodness! Red Murdoch, pick 6.
Harvath inside the 30 to 20. Blake Harvath will score.
And Mendoza takes a big hit. He never saw it coming. Trey White got in there.
There's his man, Rucker. And nobody's going to catch him. Goodbye.
Intercepted. Tyree Skipper. Touchdown.
Telly again, why not? A step forward and make it 2 for Telly.
Quarterback keeper showing off the speed. Steps on the gas. Untouched.
The G5 Hive. All G5 all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive, where we bring you the G6 college football coverage you love each and every week. I'm Luke, joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and leave those 5-star reviews. Tonight, we are launching our offensive system deep dive series, part 1 of 3. And it's going to be a great one. We'll zero in on some of the most intriguing new offensive schemes across the American and Sun Belt conferences. In tonight's episode, we will spotlight Tulane, South Florida, North Texas, James Madison, Troy, and UL Monroe. We'll break down what offenses are bringing to the table in 2026, what's changing, what's clicking, and how the schemes are designed to operate. Plus, we'll explore the ripple effects on skill position production with what we should expect quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends should look like in terms of productions, yards, touchdowns, and more. What has history told us? Grab your favorite drink, settle in, buckle up, and it's going to be a fun ride. But before we get started, we do have to do a quick stop, bring you up to date on the latest news and notes in the world of G6 college football.
Yeah, it's we've been gone for 2 weeks now. Lots happened in those 2 weeks, but there's been some news. We talked about some of the stuff we talked about previously and just kind of updating it. But we talked about the transfer portal window for Northern Illinois and the fact that they named an interim head coach and what that all meant. But that time has come where the transfer portal window is open for Northern Illinois players. Probably the big news this week or most recently was defensive tackle Mark Hensley has decided to leave. He's headed to Missouri. Previously, back when they introduced the new interim head coach and Coach Hammock was leaving, running back Lazaro Rogers and wide receiver Landon Tate had announced back then that they were entering the portal. Haven't seen anything new so far, just those 3 players. It's kind of interesting. Like you have to think like some tampering is going to take place, right? Like because there's really no spring portal window, and if teams really need a certain position and Northern Illinois has someone that they really covet, they might be going to that guy and calling him up and say, hey, we'll give you X, Y, and Z. So it'd be really interesting to kind of see what happens. Going to Conference USA and the Sun Belt and Louisiana Tech saga. It continues. Both Conference USA and the Sun Belt released their 2026 football schedules, and they both have Louisiana Tech on them. So Louisiana Tech's going to have the A team and a B team in 2026. No, not really. It'll all eventually get worked out, but today they show up on both Conference USA and Sun Belt schedules. Conference USA has asked the judge and the court to compel arbitration, which is ultimately I think where everyone expected that this would end. Louisiana Tech has until April 8th to oppose that arbitration motion. I don't think they would. I don't know why they would. Ultimately, I think they'd rather have arbitration than have a judge decide personally. But we'll see how that goes. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really all about the money, right? How much does Louisiana Tech? If Louisiana Tech wants to pay the minimum, Conference USA wants them to pay the maximum. We meet somewhere in the middle. It just makes so much sense. Like I said, I know Conference USA released a schedule including Louisiana Tech, but that had to be pretty difficult, and I haven't really broke it down like to see what it looks like, but like it just seems like it'd make much more sense given the odd, with Louisiana Tech, Conference USA has an odd number of teams, so it'd make it a lot easier. I would assume on the schedule if Louisiana Tech's not in the conference, even number of teams makes things a lot more manageable. But we'll see. Hopefully, we should get some resolution here in the coming weeks. Navy starting defensive end Julian Matuame is in the process of separating from the Naval Academy. No word on why or what's causing this, but he was kind of a breakout player for them a year ago. So I'm sure he will have some suitors once that separation takes place. Sticking with Navy, head coach Brian Newberry will serve as the defensive play caller in 2026 for the midshipmen. And staying with Navy once again, President Trump has issued an executive order that the Army-Navy game is to have an exclusive window during which no other college football game is broadcast. That's been a hot topic, of when that game is going to be. With the college football playoffs and the bowl schedule and all that. So this just kind of solidifies that no other game can really be broadcast during that window of the Army-Navy game. Doesn't necessarily establish when the game's going to be played, but it does kind of give them an exclusive window. All right, some much bigger news this week. NCAA rule changes that have been approved. We talked about most of these. Some of these we haven't talked about, and some of these are new. So we talked about the targeting rule, and that it's the first offense for a player, they will only be suspended for the game in which the offense occurred. So it used to be if it happened in the first half, you're suspended just for that game. If it happens in the second half, you're kicked out for the second half of that game and the first half of the next game. So that won't be the case anymore for your first offense. And that's only on trial, on a 1-year trial basis. After your first offense, you get called for targeting again, you go back to the old rules. So it's only the first offense. The fair catch kick has been approved. We talked about this previously. This rule will kind of align college football with the National Football League. A team can attempt a fair catch kick. After they complete the fair catch, they can choose to attempt a field goal, either using a holder or a drop kick from the spot of that catch for a get 3 points. During the attempt, the defense must stay back 10 yards, which kind of gives the kicker a cleaner look. Interesting. It'll be fun to see if it comes into play in 2026. This next one we had not talked about previously, but it was approved. The offensive pass interference penalty was reduced from 15 yards to 10 yards. So it won't be such a drive killer, so to speak, for offenses. And then the last things I want to talk about in terms of rule changes are some proposals, which at least the first one anyway, makes a ton of sense. First year FBS teams will be bowl eligible provided they meet the schedule requirements, that they are a deserving team, I believe is what they call it. But basically, they can't, as far as the schedule, they can only count one FCS win towards those 6 wins and have at least 6 wins. So, in years past, JMU. Last year we didn't get into it because Delaware and Missouri State, there wasn't enough 6-win teams, so they got to go in. But so for North Dakota State, Sacramento State, if it does get approved, they'll become immediately eligible as long as they get to meet the 6-win criteria with only one of those wins coming against FCS team. The other bowl eligibility change that was proposed was changing the selection criteria for 5-win teams. So currently, there aren't enough 6-win teams. You move to 5-win teams, and then that's based on the academic progress rate. So they have a list. Whoever's highest in that academic progress rate gets first choice. Then just go down the list. The proposal is to change that. That would allow the conference that's tied into a specific bowl to make that selection from their 5-win teams. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of indifferent. I don't really have a strong opinion on it one way or the other. But I do like that the first-year FBS teams can be bowl eligible. And they don't have to wait those 2 years anymore. All right, the last piece of news that came out, and I don't know, we've been talking about this for a long time. We haven't really talked about it recently, I don't think, but we've talked about it on previous episodes and over the course of the past few seasons. But the Division I membership committee has been having discussions on the possible creation of an autonomy subdivision. So what does that mean? That means a formal P4 and G6 split. I didn't see any details of in terms of specific teams. It was just they were talking about general things like teams with budget, teams that sponsor X number of sports, all these different criteria. There wasn't anything formally that said, hey, the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and the ACC are going to do our own thing. See the rest of you guys later. There wasn't anything like that. But ultimately that's what it means. It's kind of interesting. We've talked about this before, Luke, and I don't know, I think we're of the opinion that it's probably the Big 10 and the SEC splitting and doing their own thing once some of the ACC teams becomes more financially beneficial for them to leave the ACC in the coming years.
I would also probably add that it would be the Big 12, just with the whole basketball aspect of things. I think they would probably tag along. But I'll be curious if they care about basketball or if they just do a football only. I'll be kind of curious on that.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I mean, we talk about football, but basketball, you just you've seen people talk about last year and this year's March Madness tournament going on right now, where there aren't as many upsets. And because the transfer portal kind of ruined that, so to speak. There aren't as many upsets, and I think that's kind of the way it'll be probably for the foreseeable future. You're still gonna have some, but not nearly as many as we used to have. So I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll see if there's eventually at some point there will be a formal list, I assume, or some more formal criteria that says your budget has to be X and you have to sponsor X number of teams. We'll see, but that split's going to come eventually. Who knows when? But until then, we're here and we'll always be here for the group of 6 schools and keep marching along.
Billy Tuesday, he's like, hey, I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, can we still be friends? I guess. Absolutely. You've been here for a while, Billy, so we will welcome you in. I was thinking about Anchorman, and have you seen Anchorman, Justice?
I've seen bits and pieces.
So Anchorman has this part where Will Ferrell, he's at a pool and he's like, hey, everybody, come see how good I look. Or he's standing on a diving board and he's just has this fake report come in and he's just like, cannonball. What I want to stop right now. We just got done with the news and notes. There's 4 people watching, but don't have as many likes as those 4 people watching on YouTube. We've got a lot more people watching live on X. I need you to go like, retweet, co-tweet. I need you to hit the like. It helps with the algorithm. It will help. And again, if you're listening to us on podcast, stop. Give us a review, 5-star review, and all that good stuff.
I was going to say, if you're watching us on X, like, continue to watch us on X if that's your preferred format. But we would really appreciate if you'd head over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. That really helps us out.
All right. And like I say, let's roll. Actually, let's wave. Let's get waving into this as we are going to take a look at the Tulane Green Wave coaching changes. We talked about this a little bit in the series leading up to here, but we'll kind of recap this. And head coach Will Hall will be in his first season. They're going to have OC Russ Callaway in his first season. And okay, so who do we look at for an offensive, the offensive mind here? Well, when you look at Russ Callaway, he's been the OC at Florida last year, but he's pretty much been like a tight ends coach. When you look at Will Hall and his coaching history, he was Tulane's passing game coordinator last season. He was the head coach at Southern Miss in 2021 through 2024 and Tulane's OC in 2019 and 2020. He's been coaching since 2004, and he's been an OC or a head coach since 2006. So for this data set, we're looking at Will Hall. We use that time as his head coach in Southern Miss and OC at Tulane. As a head coach, he is 70-50, 1-0 in bowl games, and he is 6-4 in the D2 playoffs. His offensive track record, run first identity. Hall consistently prioritizes a strong rushing attack. And in 2019 at Tulane, his offense ranked 11th nationally in rushing, averaging over 243 yards per game and setting a program record for total rushing yards. He has this concept called the super back, a signature element of his style at Southern Miss. Many might remember the super back package of Frank Gore Jr. and all, especially if you play college fantasy football. Remember his kind of big year there. He would take direct snaps in that wildcat formation, creating that numerical advantage in that run game. Tempo, he often employs the high speed, fast decision, faster pace, but he does slow it down when he needs to control the game when it makes sense. Spread option is the foundation of his systems. His scheme typically operates out of the shotgun, utilizing spread option looks that involve both the quarterback and running backs as their primary rushing threats. Again, this data set is 6 years of data that we're going to go through. Justice, what do we got for quarterbacks?
Well, we talked about Will Hall and like how it was I don't know, it was an underwhelming hire, I guess, from our perspective, and I think like
absolutely.
The data we're going to go through, other than maybe for running back, kind of bears that to fruit. I will say this: the quarterback competition for the Green Wave in 2026 is a very interesting one because you have 2 very different styles. You have Caden Samanza, much more of the pocket passer. Maybe I would characterize it as functional mobility. And then you have Zion Chris, the transfer from Houston, who's a much more of a dual threat guy, right? And so depending on who wins that job is really, I think, going to dictate, what the quarterback rushing will look like. In his time at Southern Miss, it felt like he mostly had, dual threat quarterbacks. But we'll see who at the end of the day, who wins that quarterback's job. But, what does it look like from a historical perspective? His quarterback, averages a little over 200 attempts, 1,500 yards passing, 10 passing touchdowns, almost 340 yards rushing, 4 rushing touchdowns, and almost a 24 chance or rush share for that quarterback. Again, it doesn't light your world on fire, right? Like kind of like what Luke said. Like in the past, he's kind of leaned on that dual threat quarterback. His offenses lean on the running back. They're not air it out. They're not throw it around. Obviously, depending on who gets that job between Zion Chris and Caden Samanza, well, they'll tailor the off. You would assume they'll tailor the offense to their skills, but that's kind of what the quarterback looks like. Nothing too exciting. Other than they do get some opportunities in the run game. If you're wondering, like, who does the quarterback target? 30% of the time they target the slot receivers. 40% of the time it's the guys on the outside, and then 13% of the time it's the tight ends.
Which that slot number is big because you think out wide you got two guys out there, so you got that 40%, amongst those two guys, and then you got one slot guy, sometimes two, but like that's a lot. That's a lot there for the slot.
All right, well, let's move to the running backs, kind of the star of the show, if you will, in a Will Hall offense. Like you said, going back to the days of Frank Gore. So here on the screen, we kind of have the numbers here for his RB1, RB2, RB3. You see RB1, 800 yards, 832 yards, 8 touchdowns, 15 receptions, 145 receiving yards, with a rushing share of 34%. During his time at Tulane as OC and at Southern Miss, he had a 1,000-yard rusher twice. Both of those times was Frank Gore Jr. in 2022 and 2023. He kind of rides the one back. There was, I would say, you look at the history, 2020 in Tulane, it was almost like a 50-50 split between Cam Carroll and Stephon Hutterson. But other than that, he seems to really kind of ride the one back. And you can see in the rush share, the RB1 getting 34% of the rushing, 21% goes to RB2, and then 8% to the RB3. Obviously, goal line work. To your point earlier, Luke, about the super back and Frank Gore, be interested to kind of see if we see that here at Tulane, where they do the direct snap wildcat package, if you will, leads to a lot of touchdowns and short yards for the running back. The running backs aren't too involved in the passing game. Looking at his history, looks like the high number of receptions is 27. And that was 30, and that was on 36 targets. Also, the high number with 224 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was also Frank Gore in 2023. But there's been years where I look at his 2019 year in Tulane, and the top 3 running backs ended up with 11 targets for 6 receptions. So they're not really heavily involved in the passing game, obviously. But you have a talent like Frank Gore. He's not afraid to use that in the passing game. But it's not a hallmark or a trademark of Will Hall's offenses.
And to Justice's point, with that utilization in the pass game, the running backs total, when you're looking at the red zone versus outside the red zone, pull all that together, they get used 14.8% of the time in the passing game. Outside of the red zone, they're used 15.3% of the time. And then once you get into the red zone inside the 20s, their usage goes down to 10.6. So the running backs are going to get their usage from actually running, not so much in the passing. Something I saw here in the chat on YouTube. Again, if you're in YouTube, make some comments. We'll try to address it. We're going through the show, so I'm trying to look. Justice is looking, but Neil says, I'm sure Willie Fritz said that Chris had a good shot to start at Tulane. Why is that important? Well, if you remember, Will Hall was the offensive coordinator when he was at Tulane for Willie Fritz. Willie Fritz moves on from Tulane, and he's the head coach there at Houston. I'm trying to remember where Zion Chris was at prior to Houston.
Louisiana, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, couldn't remember if it was Monroe or Louisiana, but Louisiana.
Sure
Then goes to
Louisiana.
Then he goes to Houston, and then now he goes to Tulane. Probably some conversations were had there, and I like Neil's thought process there.
Well, I think he originally, like when he left Houston, I think he originally committed to like an FCS school or going to Tulane. So I think like to your point, that probably has some due to that connection with Willie Fritz and Will Hall would be my guess.
Yeah,
I don't remember the FCS that he committed to, but I remember seeing a committed graphic on his part to an FCS school before flipping to Tulane.
So good call out there, Neil.
All right, let's move over to the wide receivers. Nothing exciting in the Will Hall history of receivers in terms of like a lot of production. Again, said it multiple times. It's the running back is the star of the show in a Will Hall offense. But what does it look like for wide receivers? So your wide receiver 1, you get 79 targets, 41 receptions, 625 yards, 6 touchdowns, a 26% target share. And generally speaking, that is one of the outside receivers. Only once in that 6-year history was his wide receiver 1 a slot receiver. And that was in 2024 with TQ Mims at Southern Miss. Also looking back at his history, he's never had a 1,000-yard receiver in that 6-year history that we looked. The top yardage was 891 yards in 2022 at Southern Miss. Jason Brownlee. That was also the only time one of his receivers eclipsed the 100 target mark. Jason Brownlee had 115 targets in 2022. He also had a 35% target share, dwarfs all the other years by comparison. Wide receiver 2, 51 targets, 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, 17% target share. Also on the outside. There's been 2 years where it's been in the slot, but 4 years it was an outside receiver. And then finally the wide receiver 3, typically your slot receiver, 41 targets, 24 catches, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns with a 13% target share. Like I said, nothing to get too excited about from a wide receiver perspective here at Tulane. And they lost a lot of production in that wide receiver room from a year ago with Preston and Amari Hayes both gone. But they do return a running back in Jamari McClure. So again, bodes well for Mr. McClure.
Now, for the wide receivers in the red zone, the slot wide receiver gets a bump. So outside the red zone, 29.7% compared to in the red zone, 31.7%. And then out wide, you see a decrease in red zone utilization. So the outside receiver in the outside the red zone will get 40.3% split up. That's a combination of the 2 guys on the outside, and then the red zone will be 36%. So in the slot, you will see a slight uptick, but like a broken record, not a lot going on there in the passing game.
Yeah, Neil's asking about Tulane. Has a good track record hiring football coaches in the past with Willie Fritz and John Summerall. I definitely agree with that. And it's not to say that Will Hall won't work out. It just I don't know. It's not as exciting as past hires. We're gonna we said that, and we'll say the same thing tonight about JMU. Sometimes they do things differently. Like in JMU's case, they've always hired young up and comers, and this time they had a retread. We'll see how it works out for them. We'll see how it works out for Tulane. personally, like I think Tulane takes a step back. I know from a resources standpoint, they have some of the best resources in the American. Maybe I'm just jaded from Will Hall's tenure at Southern Miss. Southern Miss was so bad. They were one of the worst teams in the Sun Belt under Will Hall's tenure, and ultimately it led to his firing. But maybe he's learned some things. Maybe he'll rebound. We'll see.
And also to Neil's point, you look at the AD and administration. Well, he was there last year, so the AD, like the school knows what they're getting out of him, and obviously felt comfortable enough. It's like, we don't really need to go and get anybody else out there. We have what we want in-house.
All right, let's look at the tight ends under Will Hall. Again, not heavily utilized in their offense. His tight end one averages 26 targets, 16 catches, 187 yards, 1 touchdown, with a target share of 8.6%. And they are running routes 75% of the time, which is kind of on the lower end. It makes sense. Like, you look at the stats, you see they're not heavily utilized in the passing game. So they're utilized much more as a pass blocker than you typically see in a lot of offenses today. I'm trying to see here. Let's see, his top targeted tight end was in 2024 with 32 targets. Also, his top yardage was in 2019 at Tulane, 283 yards. Again, not that was only a 7, almost 8% target share. So right on that average. Not heavily utilized in the offense in terms of the passing game, but they are utilized as a blocker to help provide that pass protection.
Well, I mean, kind of, but like when you look at where they're lining up, and they've got that 75% route rate, they are in that route rate. They are lined up inside 61% of the time, but their pass blocking rate is only 20%. So they are, I don't know, cardio kings maybe is what I would say. They're going out there and they're, running routes, but where they make their hay is in the red zone. Is in this offense when they are targeted outside, and this is all tight ends, not just tight end one. It's all tight ends that have played under the system, but outside the red zone, they get targeted 11.8% versus in the red zone 19.6, practically 20% like you have there. So they definitely like to focus on the tight end. Maybe they don't get that touchdown like we see on this average throughout those years, only averaging 1 touchdown, but they do get targeted a little bit more.
Yeah. So, kind of in summary, in a Will Hall offense, it's all about the running back. And in this case, we expect that to be Jamari McClure. Stay tuned to see who wins the quarterback battle between Zion Chris and Caden Samanza. I think that'll, that the offense is obviously going to be tailored to their skill sets, I would have to assume, with Chris being the dual threat and Caden Samanza being the more, prototypical pocket passer, although he does have, I would say, functional mobility. So, yeah, that's going to wrap up Tulane.
All right, let's move on over to another American team, and let's talk about the University of South Florida Bulls. We have Brian Hartline coming in to be his first-time head coach. He brings in Tim Beck to be his in his first season as OC here. There's going to be a lot of talk right now and going into the season. Who's calling plays? You got Brian Hartline. He's first-time head coach, but he's been 9 seasons with the Ohio State. Billy Tuesday knows all about that. He's had this OC title, but is it just title and not really calling plays? Has it been Ryan Day, the puppeteer behind there pulling all the strings? That's what it seems like. So we're going to really focus in on Tim Beck because he's got a long track record of, offensive play calling. He was the head coach at Coastal Carolina in 2023 through 2025. NC State's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach 2020 through 2022, and Texas offensive coordinator and quarterback coach 2017 through 2019. He's been coaching since 1988. He's seen it all. His offensive track record, his roots are in the spread system. Philosophy often shifts to, match whatever strength his roster has. For example, he was at Nebraska in 2008 through 2014, and he was an OC 2011 through 2014, running back coach. He consistently ranked in the top 20 nationally in rushing. Then more recently, he shifted to this vertical shift where he moved towards that scheme down the field, incorporating deeper routes, allowing the quarterbacks to make those full field reads. He's got influences in the triple option. His scheme often features heavier receiver movement, specifically jet and rocket sweeps that create kind of that triple option style reads. And then he has a dual threat quarterback development. He's, whether it's Devin Leary at NC State, who in his time there set a program record with 35 touchdowns, or Sam Ehlinger at Texas, kind of likes to have that dual threat guy. So again, we're going to focus in on Tim Beck for USF. We're going to be using 9 years of data, like that time I talked about at Texas, NC State, and Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, Billy, I agree. I mean, I think of this series, I think this is probably the one that a lot of people think is the most controversial in terms of us focusing on Tim Beck and not Brian Hartline. Maybe I would talk, think about like last year when we did this series, and like the one that comes to mind is Southern Miss, where we focused on Blake Anderson and not Charles Huff. And I just, I just really think this is, I don't think you bring in someone of Tim Beck's caliber and expect, and not, he's not a play caller. He's not running his offense. We questioned how much Hartline did there as the OC at Ohio State. Some folks say the last, I guess, year or two, he was the play caller. But I think in his first role as a head coach, I think he really wants to focus on being kind of a, for lack of a better word, a CEO type head coach. He's going to let Tim Beck take care of the offense. And I'll tell you, like, another thing, like, for me, not just that I think Tim Beck's like going to be the play caller, but like, how fair is it? How fair would it be, or how genuine of us would it be to be, pull the Ohio State stats from the last 2 years, right? There's no, like, talent level that Ohio State gets. You're not going to see that at South Florida. There's no Jeremiah Smith. There's no CJ Stroud. So like, I just don't know that like it's that like his time at Ohio State in terms of what we saw in production from that offense is really going to be that applicable here at South Florida. And again, like, you don't bring Tim Beck in, if you're not going to let him, kind of run his offense. I think the reason, the big reason that they brought in Hartline was like, he's a heck of a recruiter. The kids love him and all that. And so I think that, that's going to be like his big bring to South Florida.
Sticking with some Will Ferrell movies quickly, I think of the other guys: Mark Wahlberg, Will Ferrell, Tim Beck's in there. He wants to be a peacock. He's Mark Wahlberg. He's like, I'm a peacock. You gotta let me fly. You gotta let me fly.
All right, so let's look at a Tim Beck offense. Like to Luke's point earlier, he does like a dual threat quarterback, and we saw like when that Coastal team last year, when Samari Collier eventually got the starting gig, how they performed versus the earlier in the season and late in the season after he got hurt. they weren't the same team. It wasn't even close. Like they were a pretty good Sun Belt team when Samari Collier was at quarterback. When it wasn't him, it was really ugly, really, really bad. All right. So quarterback one for a Tim Beck offense, just a shade under 300 attempts, a little over 2,200 passing yards, 18 passing touchdowns, 355 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns on average, with a rushing share of 17%. Now, if you want to look back at his history in terms of passing yards, Devin Leary and Sam Ellinger would be the highs, 3,600 or 3,400 and 3,600 yards. If you're looking at rushing yards, the highs, Sam Ellinger, 828 was the high. Go back to what we said earlier with Samari Collier a year ago. Samari Collier almost had more rushing yards than he did passing yards. He had 429 rushing yards in his time as a starter in 2025, only 496 passing yards. So, he's not afraid to, if he gets that dual threat guy, he's not afraid.
And how many passing touchdowns did he have to rushing touchdowns?
7 apiece. Like it was with Samari Collier, it was almost a 50-50 split almost exactly in terms of yards and touchdowns between rushing and passing for the quarterback. So, I think Tim Beck's at his best when he does have a dual threat quarterback. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens with that quarterback competition there at South Florida in 2026. Target distribution for the quarterback. The slot receivers, get targeted most often, I would say 34%. Out wide, outside is 38%. But you got to remember that split between two guys. And the tight ends are utilized in the offense at 17% target distribution. All right, let's move over to the running back side of things. In a Tim Beck offense, he does not have a 1,000-yard rusher in the coaching history that we're looking at. His RB1,
9 years of data.
9
no
years,
1,000 yards.
No 1,000-yard rusher. He doesn't even have anyone over 200 rushing attempts. The high of rushing attempts was 185, and that was in 2018 with Trey Watson. His high yards was 2019 with Keontae Ingram, 853 yards. So if he does, I think he finds two guys and he rides those two guys. His RB1 averages 635 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, 23 receptions, 181 receiving yards for a 29% rush share. RB2, 448 yards, 3 touchdowns, 14 receptions, 117 yards, and a 21% rush share. And then you see RB3 down there below 10% rush share with 182 yards and 1 touchdown. So, he finds his two guys and he kind of rides them. But he can have 2 700-yard guys, a 700-yard guy and a 500-yard guy. But no 1,000-yard running back. And he's had some talented guys. Look at his history. He had Trey Watson, Keontae Ingram, Bam Knight at NC State, Ricky Person at NC State. He had Braden Bennett there at Coastal Carolina, C.J. Beasley at Coastal Carolina. So he's had talented guys, but he's not a workhorse type offense for one running back. He finds 2 and he shares the load.
And even with all of those guys, only 2 guys with double-digit touchdowns. You had Braden Bennett with 11 and Bam Knight with 10. So not getting – that means we're not even getting a lot of touchdown work there when you get into the red zone. Well, maybe they get it in the passing game. No. Outside the red zone, they get work about 16% of the time. In the red zone, 9% of the time. So you almost see it, twice as less amount of work in the passing game in the red zone. So that leaves some hope here when you're looking at these offenses. We like a mobile quarterback. And, well, if we're not passing it and we're not running the ball, we got it to the running back. It's got to go to the wide receivers. Let's take a look at those wide receivers.
Yeah, and to Neil's point, that is kind of the MO here for a Tim Beck offense is, find your playmakers in the wide receiver room and get it to them. He's had a 1,000-yard receiver 3 times in this history, twice at Texas, 2018 and 2019, with Lil Jordan Humphrey and Devin Duvernay, and then in his first season at Coastal Carolina with Sam Pinckney. And then in 2018, he almost had 2,000-yard receivers. He had a little Jordan Humphrey with 1176, and then Colin Johnson with 985. So he's got some talented guys, which we know Brian Hartline is going to bring in some talented receivers. Tim Beck's not afraid to feature them.
Colin Johnson, he was a tall dude. He was like 6'9" or something, wasn't it? Like, wasn't he? He was super big.
I don't think he was that tall. I want to say like Colin Johnson was like 6'3", but I don't know off the top of my head. That's just
I'm gonna have to look him up. I remember he was with the Giants, and
from a target perspective, he's had 4 seasons where over 100 targets, and one of those happened. It happened twice in 2018 with little Jordan Humphrey and Colin Johnson.
6'6" for Colin Johnson.
There you go. So we were in the middle. Like, what did you say? 6'9"?
6. I said 6. I think I said 6'7". Maybe I did say 6'9". I don't know.
All right.
6'7".
So what is what does the wide receiver one typically look like in a Tim Beck offense? 91 targets, 61 receptions, 826 yards, 6 touchdowns for a 22% target share. Traditionally, that guy is on the outside. It's not like always on the outside. In that 9-year history, 4 times it's been a slot receiver. So a little more than 50%. It's a guy on the outside. Wide receiver 2, 61 targets, 42 receptions, 540 yards, 6 touchdowns, 15% target share. Typically, that is an slot receiver. It's only been an outside guy 3 of the 9 years, and then obviously wide receiver 3 is your other outside spot. 51 targets, 30 catches, 429 yards, 3 touchdowns for 13% target share. He said typically he likes to find his one guy and feed him, but if he's got multiple talented receivers, he's not afraid to looking at a slot guy and an outside guy and feature them both. Like I said, we've seen that multiple times throughout his history at Texas and at Coastal Carolina. NC State, it kind of seemed to feature one guy, but both Texas and Coastal Carolina, there were years where he had two really high quality receivers, and he would feature them both.
So when you're looking deeper into the numbers, red zone, outside the red zone, especially when you're playing college fantasy football, like, who should I go? The wide receiver 1 averaging 91 targets out wide. But like Justice said, 4 times it's been the slot guy. And what helps outside the red zone for the slot has been 32.7% target share. In the red zone, it goes up to 33.5%, while the outside guy goes from 39% down to 37.8% in the red zone. Again, still getting, his share, but there's 2 outside wide receivers. So if you're looking to target this offense, I might start with a slot. You get a chance that they might be the wide receiver 1 in terms of leading with targets, and you get that, not so sticky stat in touchdowns. I'll be interested to see who that slot guy is to start, and then maybe work myself out wide as to who I'd be interested in.
Let's move over to the tight ends. Tight end 1 in a Tim Beck offense averages 25 targets, 18 catches, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns for a 6.1% target share, 75% route rate. Looking at his history, the high man in his history in terms of yards is in 2020 with Kerry Angeline, 393 yards. If you're looking for the top guy in terms of targets, that would have been 2018 at Texas with Andrew Beck, he got 42 targets. You know, it's not like I think it's really more of the maybe the talent that they have. Like, maybe the the NC State, looking at NC State in 2020, they didn't have like a really standout a wide receiver, and so maybe or a number two guy, and so the tight end got utilized a little bit more, but it's still not a whole lot of production from a tight end. I mean, like for me to get excited about a tight end, I want to see 400 plus yards, right? And so we don't have that. We almost got it in 1 year, but that's it.
And this also goes into what might get you excited when you look at different stats, but then when you put it in with how the tight ends are utilized. Oh, the tight end is only in line 38% of the time. So you're like, all right, they're out wide. Like, that's perfect. That's kind of what you want for a tight end. But then you put up uninspiring numbers like this. Pass blocking rate 20%. So when they're out there to run routes, and they run routes like you said 75% of the time. They definitely get that bump up in the red zone. 10.3% outside the red zone, goes up to 16.8 when you get in there. So when they do get targeted, it is in the red zone, but still uninspiring with those types of numbers.
All right, so 10-back offense, dual threat quarterback, typically, and featuring the wide receivers. You're looking for your main outside receiver, and then the slot guy as either your number one or two.
All right, let's move on over to North Texas. Mean Green. Coaching changes. We've got Neil Brown as the head coach. There's no OC listed. Assume he will also do play calling there, as he was the assistant to the head coach at Texas in 2025. He was the head coach at West Virginia in 2019 through 2024, and the head coach at Troy 2015 through 2018. He is 72-51 as a head coach and 5-1 in bowl games. Brown's offensive track record is it's kind of grown up. It's a modern take on the air raid that has evolved from a pass heavy over the years, high tempo system, to more balanced physical ball control. Well, his roots are in that Hall Mumme and Mike Leach coaching trees. His philosophy centers around getting playmakers the ball, however they need to run, pass, whatever. He's going to have a dual threat quarterback, and that's where he's going to focus on. He believes that a dual threat quarterback is the most effective way to win. As he states, it allows the offense to be less than perfect, but still succeed through off-script plays. He looks to be efficient over explosive. He looks at efficiency over explosiveness. His offenses often focus on high percentage throws and working the way down the field methodically, as people are saying nowadays, sustained drive rather than purely hunting for those deep shots. And his time there at West Virginia, he's definitely had this RPO modern run game where he's doing these run pass options, a lot of different run schemes, including inside zone, duo, and counters. So again, the data purposes, when we're looking at this, we're looking at that time at Troy, West Virginia, as we now have 9 years of data that we will use for this.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Neil. I do believe Neil Brown was there at Troy when they did beat LSU. And I agree. I like this hire for North Texas. It's gonna be different though. I mean, it's gonna be a little bit different, I think, than what folks expected under Eric Morris. Eric Morris's offenses were so high flying, fast paced. And not to say Neil Brown's won't be that, but I don't think they're gonna be to the same level in terms of pace and number of plays and throw it around as much as typically an Eric Morris offense did. I think Neil Brown, he's going to use what he's got, right? If he needs to throw it around, he's going to do it. But if he's got a stellar running back, he'll lean on them as well. All right, looking at the quarterback in a Neil Brown offense, quarterback one typically averages 351 attempts, a little over 2,500 passing yards, 16 passing touchdowns. You look at that long history, it's only 277 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns with a 12% rushing share. But you look at his last 2 years there at West Virginia with Garrett Green, and those numbers are go through the roof, so to speak. 849 rushing yards, 773 rushing yards. Again, like to Luke's point, he's going to use the skill set that he has, and he does have some dual threat quarterbacks there at North Texas. Chris Jimerson did not follow. Was a high level recruit for North Texas. He was someone that some of the bigger programs wanted. They just didn't want him to play quarterback. North Texas said, "You come here, you can play quarterback," and he didn't follow. He didn't follow the coaching staff. He stayed at North Texas. I would like to see Chris Jimerson win that job. I think he can do some good things there for the Mean Green. He's definitely a dual threat. He's an exciting guy with the ball in his hands, very much like a Garrett Green, type quarterback, which is what we saw in the last 2 years at West Virginia. So, again, if Jimerson's the quarterback, I would expect the rushing yards to be more like Garrett Green, around that 600, 700, maybe even 800-yard mark. And I don't know, they brought in someone else, and I don't know off the top of my head. I can't think of who that was, but I don't think they were like a true dual threat quarterback. If that's the case, we're not going to see as many rushing yards. Looking at his history in terms of passing yards, the high was in 2017 at Troy, 3,278 passing yards, and we talked about the high at rushing yards, 2024 there at West Virginia with 849 rushing yards for Garrett Green. And in Garrett Green's 2 years, his rush share was above 20% at 22 and 23%. Again, he's going to use the skill sets of the guys he has. So for me, like if I was to bet today who I think will be the quarterback, I'd probably put my money on Chris Jimerson, but that'll be a battle I'm sure that'll go into fall camp. Looking at the target distribution in a Neil Brown offense, the slot receivers targeted 34% of the time, the guys on the outside 43%, and the tight ends just 6.4%.
So, Justice, the other names that you're here's who they brought in. That was Taven Jackson, UCF,
another dual threat guy,
and then Chasson. It's
Dita from East Carolina.
Yeah,
who's not really. He's not like compared to those other two. He's not really as much of a dual threat. More of a functional mobility guy. I mean, for me, like, I want to see Chris Jimerson. I think he probably has the most upside of that quarterback room. We'll see what it looks like, though, in spring and fall camp. All right, looking at the running backs in a Neil Brown offense, your RB1 averaging 854 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 23 catches, 146 yards, and a 41% rush share. He finds his running back one, his workhorse guy, and he sticks with him. In this case, I think it's going to be Mr. Jaheim White. Neil Brown's very familiar with Jaheim White. He coached him at West Virginia, and Jaheim White is now at North Texas. Assuming he's fully healthy here in 2026, I expect him to be the workhorse back. You look at his rush history, he had 4 years of a running back with over 1,000 yards. The top year was 1,283 yards in 2016 at Troy with Jordan Shun. And as the numbers show, that running back one gets to work on the goal line. Every year in the 9-year history, except for 3, he's had 10+ rushing touchdowns. The high again being in 2016 with Troy, and that was 16 touchdowns. Looking at his RB2, 484 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 13 receptions, 97 receiving yards, 23% rush share, and then the RB3, not much scraps there for him, but RB1 in this case, I expect to be Jaheim White to be the workhorse running back for this offense in 2026.
All right. And then when you look at the red zone usage, similar to all the other coaches that we've covered, the red zone usage goes down from 13.9 to 11.1%. So definitely going to use them to run the ball.
All right, let's look at the receivers in a Neil Brown offense. Your wide receiver 1, 86 targets, 56 receptions, 741 yards, 5 touchdowns, 22% target share, and it's a guy on the outside. Looking at his history, 3 of the 9 years it was a slot guy. So 6 years, 6 of the 9, it's been a guy on the outside. Also, he does not have a 1,000-yard receiver in that 9-year history. The top mark is 817 yards, and that was 2016 with Troy. He does have 3 times where his wide receiver 1 went over 100 targets. That was 2016 at Troy, 2019 at West Virginia, and 2022 at West Virginia. All right, his wide receiver 2 averages 61 targets, 39 receptions, 549 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 15% target share. It's the guy on the opposite side on the outside. And then finally rounding out with his wide receiver 3, his slot receiver typically averages 50 targets, 34 catches, 423 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 13% target share.
And like you're, stating here, you want the outside guy, and their usage outside the red zone, 43.5%. Inside the red zone, barely changes, 42.3%. So they're going to target the outside. The slot usage outside the red zone, 33.6. In the red zone, stays about the same, 33.5. But again, that third option is the slot guy. Only one time has he had a wide receiver with double-digit touchdowns. You want the quarterback who's probably going to be a rushing threat. You're going to want the running back in this offense. But before we definitively say that, let's look at the tight end.
Yeah, tight ends aren't.
Yeah, we do.
Aren't,
okay.
I mean, they've had years where they've been good. I mean, his last 2 years at West Virginia, they were good. Cole Taylor, in both of those years, he had 60 targets and over 400 yards. But prior to that, it's pretty abysmal, and it really knocks the average down. His tight end 1, that 9-year average, 22 targets, 14 catches, 149 yards, 1 touchdown, 6.1% target share with a 79% route run rate. So, I mean, kind of what that tells me is if he has, a guy like a Cole Taylor who's, pretty talented, pretty good, he's not afraid to use him, but he's got to have a really talented guy. Like, other than that, he's not – if it's not someone super talented, he's not really, utilizing the tight end in the passing game.
And, like you said, has the ability to use them. They talked about, the red zone usage going up from outside the red zone 5.9 to in the red zone 9.8. They're in line 55% of the time, but they're only blocking 15% of the time. So they're going out They are those cardio kings, 79% route rate, like you mentioned.
So
go ahead.
Just summarize North Texas, a Neil Brown offense, you know, dual threat quarterback, and then that workhorse running back one who we expect to be Jaheim White.
All right, let's take a look at the JMU Dukes, James and Madison. They bring in that retread Justice was talking about. Billy Napier, Sun Belt. Billy is back for his first season here with the Dukes. He is 62-35 as the head coach. He was the head coach at Florida 2022 through 2025, the head coach at Louisiana 2018 through 2021. He's been coaching since 2003. He was the Sun Belt Coach of the Year in 2019, 2021, two-time Sun Belt champion, and 4 Sun Belt West championships. They also bring in OC and quarterback coach Cam Aiken, be his first season, but he does not have a track record of calling plays. So that means, and Sunbelt Billy hasn't got exactly the best press when it comes to what he does with the offensive side. But because of Cam Aiken's, like literally, so he was an offensive coordinator at East Tennessee State in 2025. But other than that, there's nothing. It's a graduate assistant, offensive intern, offensive assistant, running backs coach, offensive analyst. Then he was, like I said, that offensive coordinator. So like, really going to be hard pressed to see Cam calling plays. So for this, we are looking at Billy's offensive track record. Run first, pro style system that emphasizes controlling the clock, utilizing heavy personnel groupings, and using extensive pre-snap movements to identify those defensive coverages. Unlike many modern spread offenses, he typically operates under center, especially when focusing rushing attacks, which, like I said, he hasn't had the best track record in terms of being creative, which so that sometimes leads to tendencies that critics describe as predictable. These criticisms, while being successful at Louisiana, Napier's offense has faced that criticism at Florida, like I was talking about, for being too conservative. It doesn't have those explosive plays and having poor spacing with the receivers being too close together, making it easier for defenses to defend. And like I said, his offenses have been vanilla or predictable, especially in short yardage red zone situations. And sometimes clock management has been an issue with timeouts and not kneeling the ball. I can think of that game about 2 years ago when they should kneel the ball and he didn't fumble, all that stuff. So again, for this purpose, we're using the time in Louisiana and Florida with Sunbelt Billy, 8-year data set. Let's take a look at the quarterback.
Before we get started, kind of like what I said with Tulane, I expect JMU to take a step back by JMU standards. I'm not saying they're going to be the worst team in the Sun Belt, but I don't think they will be the best team in the Sun Belt. I think the coaching change is a big part of that. But, we saw a lot of folks, at least I saw a lot of folks on social media today talking about the returning production and how JMU is near the bottom in the FBS in terms of returning production. So, you kind of get a double whammy. You get the Billy Napier effect in terms of what he's going to do and what he means to the offense. And, you don't return a lot of guys from last year's team. So what does a Billy Napier quarterback look like? Averages 324 passing attempts, just a shade over 2,500 yards, 19 passing touchdowns. If he has a dual threat quarterback, he will use them. 311 rushing yards, average 4 touchdowns with a rush share of 13%. Looking at his history, he's only once has he had a 3,000-yard passer, and that was in 2019 at Louisiana. His high for rushing was at Florida in 2022 with Anthony Richardson, 713 rushing yards, and he had 9 touchdowns and 21% rush share on the year. And so he's gonna, if the quarterback will run, he's gonna let him run. He's gonna, if he can throw, let him throw. But he doesn't get too crazy either way, right? He's. I mean, I remember his time at Louisiana is like, and we're gonna get to the running backs here in a minute, but like how I'd characterize it is he has like 2, maybe 3 running backs, and it's a constant rotation. It's feed him the ball, and feed him the ball some more. Looking at his quarterbacks and the passing game and the target distribution, the slot receivers targeted 33% of the time, the outside guys 34%, and the tight end 16%. So let's move over to those running backs, kind of what a Billy Napier offense is known for. And like I said, he finds his 2-3 guys and feeds them the ball a lot, and that's kind of what the history shows us. It's RB1 averaging 902 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 16 catches, 139 yards for a 36% rush share. RB2, 739 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a 27% rushing share. Having said that, he's only had a 1,000-yard rusher twice in his in this 9-year history. Both times it was at Louisiana, 2019 and in 2018. Just looking at the stats, it's not quite a 50-50 split, but it's fairly close between the RB1 and RB2. He rides those guys a lot, and then you look at some years, and there was almost a 3-headed monster. I'm looking at the 2019 and 2018 seasons at Louisiana, and the rushing yards go 1181, 973, and 743 between 3 running backs. You go to the 2019, it's 1147, 822, 878. So, he has 2 or 3 guys, and he's going to run them some more. That's what he did in the Sun Belt. Given all the change and the loss of production, I expect that's kind of what we're going to see out of this JMU offense in year 1. I don't think that they're not going to be as high scoring as they were under Chesney, and so again, I think JMU kind of takes a step back.
And he had 5 straight seasons at Louisiana, Lafayette, and then his first year there at Florida of double-digit touchdowns for that RB1. With 1 year, his RB2 had 11. So they're going to get the touchdowns here. You can see that RB1 averaging over 9 seasons, 10 touchdowns. Like, I feel very confident they're going to at least get 8 touchdowns from an RB1 in the system. And then talk about their utilization running the ball. Well, in the passing game, they get used outside the red zone 13.9%, and in the red zone 13.1%. So not a lot of difference. They're going to get utilized in the passing game. You see those, it's not going to be a lot, but they will get utilized.
All right, let's move over to the receiving game. As you might expect, looking at the passing numbers, nothing too sexy here. He's never had a 1,000-yard receiver in this 9-year history. Matter of fact, he's only had 1 over 900, and that was in 2023. Ricky Pearsall, NFLer, 963 yards, and then he had 899 yards with Jamarcus Bradley in 2019 at Louisiana. Also, no receiver over 100 targets. The highest targeted year was 2023. Again, Ricky Pearsall with 87 targets. So what does his wide receiver 1 look like? Averages 64 targets, 43 catches, 652 yards, 5 touchdowns, a 19% target share. And then over that 9-year history, it's It's been a pretty even split, outside and slot guy, wide receiver.
But I do want to point out it has been a split, but it's been interesting because it's a very distinctive.
Yeah,
He was
between
talking about
which
Louisiana.
school he was at.
Yeah, at Louisiana, it's outside. As soon as he goes to Florida, it's the slot. Now, is that G5 or G6 versus P4? Is it what he's accustomed to now? Well, it kind of, I don't know. If I'm digging into this offense and I really want to pick a wide receiver if I play college fantasy football, gets into your wide receiver too being on the outside. Well, maybe I'll just take an outside guy.
Yeah, and the outside guy is pretty consistent. Has always been the wide receiver two has always been a guy on the outside, averaging 52 targets, 34 catches, 515 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 15% target share. And the wide receiver 3 is kind of the opposite of the wide receiver 1. At Louisiana, it was a slot guy. At Florida, it was an outside guy. So pretty even split. But they're averaging 37 targets, 25 catches, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an 11% target share. So nothing too sexy from a receiver in a Billy Napier offense.
When it comes to outside the red zone versus in the red zone, the slot wide receiver utilization outside the red zone is 33.7% compared to 31.1% in the red zone. So not that big of a difference, but you definitely see a drop with out wide, 35.2% outside the red zone versus in the red zone, 28.8%. Couple that with the fact that the slot has been the wide receiver 1 in this offense for the last 4 seasons. Like I said, maybe I want to, go out wide, but maybe I want to chase the touchdowns and go for the slot wide receiver because he's going to get utilized there in the red zone. Plus, his track record as of late, those last 4 years have been slot guys. So maybe I'm going to change my mind. I think I said go out wide, but you know what? I'm going to say go slot. Go slot if you really want a pass catcher at JMU.
All right, let's move over to the tight end. In a Billy Napier offense, the tight end 1 averages 26 targets, 19 catches, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 7.4% target share. They're running routes 77% of the time. He does not have a tight end with over 300 yards in this history that we're looking at. The tops was 2023 with Arla Sportingham, 289 yards. The top targets was in 2025, 47 targets for Hayden Hansen. So they're out there, but they're not heavily utilized in the passing game.
But when they do get utilized, it is in the red zone, as their outside the red zone utilization is 14.7 compared to in the red zone at 23.4%. They are in line 61% of the time and pass blocking 20% of the time.
So, summary, JMU offense, look for the running backs to dominate. It might be 2, it might be 3 of them. But, a Billy Napier offense typically run, and run some more.
And if you want to take a shot on a wide receiver for whatever reason, maybe look at the slot. All right, let's move on over to the Trojans, who bring in Gerald Parker who have Gerald Parker in for his 3rd season, but they've hired a new OC in Adam Austin. Will be his 1st season. He was Tarleton State's OC 2024 and 2025, Tarleton State's quarterback coach 2021 through 2023. He was at Garden City Community College in 2020, but there was no season. 2019, Eastern Kentucky offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And then at Midwestern State, he was there from 2011 to 2018. He was the quarterbacks coach 2011 and 12, and then the OC in 2013 through 2018. We are going to hone in on Adam Austin, looking at his time there as an OC at Tarleton State, his offensive track record he is known for his explosive, high-scoring veer and shoot system, which is this wide-open spread offense rooted in the Art Briles philosophy. His offensive styles is heavy RPO based with design to stretch the defense any which way, horizontally, vertically, whatever. He's just trying to put so much pressure on the defensive responsibilities. He's going to have guys all over the field. High volume production at Tarleton State last season. His offense led the FCS with 42.4 points per game. And in 2 seasons there at Tarleton, his offensive averaged 36.6 points and 436.7 yards per game. And the team frequently averaged about 200 yards rushing and 250 to 300 yards passing. I talk about that passing. It was pretty efficient as in 2025, the Tarleton ranked 4th in the FCS in pass efficiency and 4th nationally in passing yards completion in his tenure there. So again, we're going to be looking at his time here at Tarleton State. Now, with the FCS, we do not have any red zone data for the
We do have it. We do have it.
Oh, we do. Oh, we do have it for him. Okay, I did not catch that.
Yes, we do. We do have it for Adam Austin. It's not easily gettable, and so I was able to get it, but I only have it for the 2025 season. I don't have it for 2024. This one I'm really, really excited about. This is an offense. I think, and I think Adam Austin is going to be a great offensive coordinator for Troy. I think Troy fans should rejoice. Their offense, at least last year, was, I don't even know, it was putrid, repugnant. I don't know what to call it. It was not great. It was pretty bad. And I think Adam Austin is going to do wonders for the Trojans offensively. Probably one of the hires I'm most excited by in terms of offense for the 2026 season. So let's dive right into his quarterbacks. His quarterback one averages 314 attempts, just a shade under 3,000 yards, 27 passing touchdowns, 115 rushing yards, 1 rush touchdown, with a 6.5% rush share. I'll have to admit, I think the only Tarleton State game I saw last year was their final game in the playoffs. Their quarterback was not really a true dual threat guy. I'd say he had functional mobility, but they would throw it around, man. He had 30 touchdowns in 2025, 23 touchdowns in 2024. We look at the target distribution, 30% to the slot guy, 62% out wide, and only 5% to the tight ends. We'll get to the tight ends, but they're not really utilized in this offense. Just exciting, high flying offense. Like Luke said, spread it out and get it to your playmakers. All right, let's move over to his running backs. And his running back one averages 1,402 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 catches, 98 yards, 41% rush share. He finds this guy, man, and he rides him. Now it's only a 2-year history that we're looking at, and so it's heavily influenced by the 2024 season of Kayvon Britton, where he had 1,966 yards. In 2025, his top running back had 838 yards and 7 touchdowns. Kayvon Britton also had 18 touchdowns. And so, you saw him in 2024, he leaned more heavily on the rush, whereas in 2025, going back, when we looked at the quarterback numbers, was much more heavy passing attack. So he's going to take advantage of of the players and the talent that he has. I think the important takeaway for running backs is like he finds his guy and he's gonna rely on that guy. His RB2 averages shade over 400 yards, 6 touchdowns, 8 catches, 42 receptions. 42 receiving yards and 19% rush share, and RB3, 396 yards, also 6 touchdowns, a 14.4% rushing share. Looking, we talked about the receiving game, and I'll turn it over to you, Luke, but they're not like heavily utilized in the receiving game.
No, you talk about utilizing what they do, and Kayvon Britton was used the most at 5.8%. Not a lot. Overall, outside the red zone, utilized 5.4%, and even less in the red zone, 4.5%. So they're going to look to run the ball in if they're going to utilize the running back there.
All right, let's move over to the stars of the show here, the receivers in an Adam Austin offense. His wide receiver 1 averages 102 targets, 65 catches, a little over 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, 29% target share, and it was an even split. In 2024, it was a guy on the outside. 2025, it was a guy in the slot. The important thing to note is both years, it was a 1,000-yard receiver. So again, he finds his wide receiver 1, and he is going to feed that guy. In terms of targets, 2024 is the only time he had more than 100 targets, and that was 125. Wide receiver 2 averages 82 targets, 54 catches, 690 yards, 3 touchdowns, 23% target share. And again, that's if the wide receiver 1 is a slot guy, the wide receiver 2 is an outside guy, and vice versa. If wide receiver 1 ends up being a slot guy, wide receiver 2 is the guy on the outside. And then his wide receiver 3, 58 targets, 37 catches, 620 yards, 7 touchdowns, 16% target share, and that is typically an outside guy. Like I said, he finds his receivers and he feeds them, man. And you look at the 2025 season, and he had 3, really productive receivers. He had 1 receiver over 1,000 yards, wide receiver 2, 806 yards, wide receiver 3, 749 yards. So if he's got the talent, he's going to feed all the guys. But obviously, you want that lead dog, the guy getting the 1,000 yards in the season.
All right. Might have to help me out with the red zone, because I don't know if I've got it broken into I have slot wide receivers, just all of it.
Yes, we can't break it down. Yes,
okay.
No, you
okay.
can't. I can't break it down in slot and outside. The
okay,
data,
that's what I was confused about. Earlier,
Yeah.
I was like, "Hey, we don't have that for the FCS." And you're like, "Oh, well, we have it for this." So
we do have it for them, but it's wide receiver red zone data. It's not. We don't. I can't break it down between
Gotcha.
slot guy and outside guy.
Gotcha. So yeah, we had red zone for them is 70.5% versus 89.8%. So in the red zone. But what is kind of interesting about this, when you look at the wide receiver 1 being an even split, and then the wide receiver 3, while you get half the yards, you get about a good touchdown equity there with the outside guy. So you could almost play hey, I know this guy, is going to be, he could be the wide receiver 3, but he looks to be that second option when it comes to passing the ball in the red zone, and it's going to be the outside guy. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to point out. But like you said, when they have that wide receiver 1 and they funnel the targets to him, they also get double. it was 14 touchdowns in 1 year and 8 in another year. That would have been 2024. We had 14 touchdowns. Like,
and
you can either kind of like hedge your bets. You're like, hey, all or nothing. Like, give me the targets, give me the yards, give me the touchdowns. I think I got the guy. Or if you go with an outside guy, maybe you luck into that, or maybe you get the wide receiver 3, which isn't great, but you just have to figure out when to play him a touchdown.
You're looking at the touchdowns, looking at the slot guys, they only averaged 4 touchdowns. He had 1 year with 8 touchdowns, and then the other year was 0 for the slot guy. The outside guys, are the guys getting the touchdowns. You had, 14 touchdowns in 2024. 2025, the outside guy had 6, and then the other outside guy had 8 and 5. So, while we don't have red zone data broken down by slot and outside, it would seem to suggest that the outside guy is probably the more favored option.
Absolutely. And then, like we talked about, the tight ends, like not much to talk about.
Yeah, not much to talk about here with tight ends. They only averaged 12 targets, 10 catches, 87 yards. But touchdowns, they did average 4. That's heavily boosted by 2025 Dawson Hearn. He only had 10 catches, 6 of them were for touchdowns. But the year prior, he only had 10 catches and only had 1 touchdown.
Talk about that usage in the red zone. Outside the red zone, used 3.7% of the time. In the red zone, 13.6% of the time. So that's just like an astronomical utilization from between the 20.
It's kind of like what that's like. I guess that's where they're used, right? Like, you look at the route; they're only running routes 42% of the time,
and their pass block rate 55% of the time. But they're going to be in line 71% of the time.
Yeah. So, like, if you're looking for, maybe like you're hoping the tight end gets a touchdown here and there, but that's really the only time that they're kind of featured in the passing game.
Well, let's wrap this up just with our 6th team of the night, the UL Monroe Warhawks. We have a coaching change at OC as Bryant Vincent looks to be abandoning his play calling here in his 3rd season to new OC Jesse Montalto in his 1st season. Jesse Montalto was at Iowa Central Community College JUCO here in Iowa, the great state of Iowa. Let me tell you how great this state is. So good. Jesse's got all the weight on his shoulders this year at UL Monroe. 2018 through 2025, he was the head coach there at Iowa Central. 2014 through 2017, he was the head coach at Ellsworth Community College, another JUCO or a community college here in JUCO in Iowa. And then staying in Iowa, he was 2005 through 2017, Upper Iowa University, 2005 and 6, wide receiver coach, 2007 and 8, the OC, and 2009 through 13, the quarterbacks coach. Now, Montalto's offensive track record, you know what? I probably don't even need to tell you guys. You guys know all about Montalto and all of his great things there at Iowa Central Community College. He has an aggressive, high-scoring offensive style that emphasizes efficiency, multi-quarterback versatility. Multi-quarterback versatility. That's not great for those who play college fantasy football, let me tell you that. And then a strong balance between the run and the pass. High efficiency scoring. His offenses are designed to, quote-unquote, handle business early. In 2025, the season opener, his team scored touchdowns on their first 11 offensive possessions. He frequently secures victories by big margins, often winning by 30 points or more against unranked opponents. Like I talked about, that quarterback versatility. Montalto often utilizes multiple quarterbacks, believing, I should say, several capable leaders who, quote unquote, bring something special to the field and is essential for depth and tactical flexibility. So he's got a balanced aerial and ground attack. While his teams can put up those big passing numbers, He had one half where they threw the ball for 271 yards and 4 touchdowns. They're typically pounding the ball and a presence there on the ground, constantly running over 100 yards per half, especially here in Iowa with our poor weather and conditions. So we're going to be looking at the last 5 seasons here as he was the head coach at Iowa Central. Take it away.
The other thing I want to point out here, we don't have red zone data for JUCO. We also don't have a split for like if it's an outside receiver or slot receiver, and all of our when we talk about target shares or that kind of stuff, we don't have target data. We only have reception data. So it's like in the past we've been talking about target shares or target distribution. Everything for UL Monroe will be reception share and a reception distribution. I'm not sure if there's anyone that tracks target data. I'm sure someone does, but I don't know where it is. I did find this data on the Iowa Central website for the past 4 years, but it didn't include target data.
We are sickos. We are complete sickos. If you're a sicko like us, give us a like. Make sure to retweet this video and leave those 5-star reviews.
Yeah, to Luke's point, he often utilized a dual quarterback system, but his quarterback one averages 221 attempts, 1,658 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, 424 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and a rush share of 22%. In his time at Iowa Central, his quarterback won the high mark for passing yards was 2,704 passing yards, and that was in 2021. And rushing yards was 723, and that was in 2025. Rushing touchdowns was 13, also in 2021. Looking at his reception distribution, because we don't have target data, the wide receivers are targeted 80% of the time, running backs 12%, and tight ends 5.5% of the time. All right, let's move over to the running backs and a Jesse Montalto offense. I will say in the history that we looked at in that 5-year history, one time he had a 1,000-yard running back, and that was in 2024 with none other than Sincere Bowers, who was at West Virginia last year. I don't know where he's not at West Virginia anymore, but I know in 2025 he was at West Virginia. But his RB1 averages 644 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, 16 catches, 167 yards, a 25% rush share. RB2, 287 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 6 catches, 67 yards, 14% rush share. And his RB3, 160 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches for a 10% rush share. And again, he finds his guy and he rides him. But there's been some years where it's been kind of ugly. His RB1 in 2023 only had 300 rushing yards. So you went from the 300 rushing yards in 2023 as his low to the 1,008 rushing yards in 2024 as his high with Sincere Bowers. It's also the only time the a running back had double-digit touchdowns. That was in 2024. Sincere Bowers had 12.
And then, he will utilize the running backs in the passing game as the running backs average 11.6%. And again, that's reception share in this case. And 3 of those 5 years he's had get over 10 receptions. And again, over 150 yards in 3 of those 5 seasons. So not going to get a lot of touchdowns.
Well, I mean, he had Sincere Bowers, right? And like talk about Sincere Bowers went from Iowa Central to West Virginia, talented kid. He had 1,000 yards rushing. He had 363 yards receiving that same year. So he's gonna if he has talented guys, he's not afraid to utilize them. All right, let's move over to the wide receivers. Wide receiver one, like I said, we don't have target data, so we're just going to talk about receptions and reception share. So his wide receiver one averages 45 receptions, 705 yards, 9 touchdowns, 20% reception share. Again, we don't have a breakdown of what's outside guy or a slot guy. Looking at the wide receiver history, though, he had 942 yards as the high in 2023 at 863 in 2022 and 777 in 2021. More recently, it's been much more spread out with his wide receiver ones, 482 yards, 462 yards. His wide receiver two averages 29 catches, 402 yards, 5 touchdowns, 13% reception share. And wide receiver three, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10% reception share.
And if I had to guess as to where these guys are lining up, I would say like in 2021 and 2022, Washington was their wide receiver one, and he was 6'4". And then
so he's probably on the outside.
But then
not the
Mario
stereotype,
Sanders,
but
yeah. I mean, probably. But then Mario Sanders, when he was their wide receiver one, he's 5'10". So you could say he could be on the outside.
Could be either or.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to look up these other two in the process. Great podcasting here by me. But when you look at Austin Bomney, he was 6'2".
So he is probably an outside guy. And then Jacob Kanaya in 2025.
And Jacob, he was 6'1". So there's a good chance. Probably outside.
It's probably an outside guy as the wide receiver one.
Yeah, if I were to guess.
Looking at the tight ends again, nothing too exciting here. Tight end one averages 12 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns for a 5% reception share. Again, we don't have red zone data on the JUCOs, and we don't have route percentage on the tight ends at the JUCO level. But his high tight end in terms of yards was 304 in 2024, and he had 29 receptions for a 14% reception share. That's really the only remarkable year for a tight end. So maybe that year he had a pretty good tight end and utilized them again. Utilized the guys based on the skill sets of what he has and the talent, on that particular team. One thing I have not mentioned tonight that I failed to mention earlier, and I want to mention before we go, if you like these kind of breakdowns, you can do all this yourself if you're a subscriber to our website. Now, you can't get the JUCO data. We don't have a database of JUCO data, but we do have a offensive system database for quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends for the FBS that goes back to 2016. And then we have the offensive coordinators and head coaches in that database. And then we also have it for the FCS that goes back to 2021, also includes the offensive coordinator and head coaches, etc. So, if you're interested in maybe some teams we didn't talk about tonight that were in the Sun Belt or in the American, if you're a subscriber to our website, you can look and find this data yourself for any FBS or FCS offensive system. So, you can help us out, go over there and subscribe to the website. But if you're not a subscriber to the website, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That helps us out as well.
And if you're listening to us in podcast form, you've probably, we kind of failed at the beginning. If you're listening to us in podcast form and you've made it this far, go check us out on YouTube, because we've got a lot of cool graphics, and sometimes it's not great listening to all the stats and whatnot. So we've got nice little charts that we have there. We had a lot of you guys watching this on YouTube. Make sure to hit that thumbs up. But I mean, that does it for tonight. We made it through the American and the Sun Belt. If you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on X. Give us a follow. If you're listening to us on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. They really, really help us out. Be sure to join us next week as we continue our 2026 Coaching Deep Dive series with part 2 of 3. And if you're interested in what some of these new look offensive systems are going to look like in this new Pac-12 and the new look Mountain West, we'll look into that next week. You won't want to miss it. Until the next time, we are the G55.